At 17 I had my unplanned son. My boyfriend told me you're just a mistake I made. If you keep this kid don't expect a cent. And left. I put my baby up for adoption and started a fresh life. Later one searched for my son and froze when I learned. You're just a mistake I made. Kyle didn't even look up from his video game when he said it. The blue glow from the television lit up his jaw, the stubble he was so proud of, the complete lack of concern on his face. I was standing in his basement bedroom holding a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, and he was button-mashing his way through some zombie shooter like I'd asked him about the weather. Did you hear what I said? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Yeah. He finally paused the game, but only to grab a handful of chips from the bag next to him. I heard you. And I'm telling you, if you keep this kid, don't expect a cent from me. Not 1 cent. I'll deny everything. His mom was upstairs. I could hear her watching some talk show, the audience laughing at something. The whole house smelled like fabric softener and those vanilla candles she kept in every room. Normal house. Normal Tuesday afternoon. And her son was sitting there telling me I was disposable. Kyle, I'm 17. So am I. Which is exactly why I'm not about to ruin my life over this. He looked at me then, finally, and there was nothing there. No fear, no guilt, no recognition that we'd been together for almost a year. Just annoyance. Like I was a telemarketer who caught him at a bad time. You should have been more careful. I was on the pill. Then you should have taken it right. He turned back to his game. Look, I've got practice in an hour. You can let yourself out. I stood there for another 30 seconds. Maybe 40. Long enough to understand that this was real, that he meant it, that the boy who told me he loved me in his car 3 months ago was the same person now treating me like a problem to be solved. Or ignored. Preferably ignored. I walked up those basement stairs, past his mom who smiled at me and asked if I wanted to stay for dinner, out the front door, and down the street toward my house. It was October. The leaves were changing. I remember that specifically because I kept thinking about how everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning, before I knew. They'd been like this from the start, Kyle's family. His parents had money, not wealthy, but comfortable, and they'd raised him with this unshakable belief that consequences were for other people. He'd totaled his car junior year, drunk, and his dad had made it go away. He cheated his way through half his classes, and his mom had smiled at teachers until they adjusted grades. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that when things got hard, I'd be the thing that got made to disappear. But I was 17. And being 17 means you don't know anything, especially about the people you think you love. My parents didn't take it well. That's putting it mildly. My mom cried for 3 days straight, the kind of crying that sounds like something breaking. My dad didn't speak to me for a week. When he finally did, it was to ask me what I wanted to do, and the way he asked it made it clear there was only one right answer. I thought about keeping the baby. I thought about it a lot. I'd lie in bed at night with my hand on my stomach, still flat, still normal, and try to imagine a version of my life where I could make it work. But every version fell apart. I had no money, no job, no degree. My parents weren't going to help, not really. Kyle had already started telling people at school that I was lying, that the baby wasn't his, that I was just crazy and desperate. 3 weeks after I told him, I started getting texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Girls from school calling me names. Someone spray-painted a word on my locker that the janitor had to sand off. Kyle's mom called my mom to say that I should stop harassing her son with my accusations. I stopped going to school. Finished the semester online. Spent most of my pregnancy in a kind of fog, going to doctor's appointments and eating when my mom reminded me to and trying not to think about the future because every time I did, I couldn't breathe. The adoption agency was a small office downtown, above a dry cleaner. The woman who worked there was named Patricia, and she had gray hair and reading glasses on a chain and the kind of patient voice that made me feel like maybe I wasn't the worst person in the world. She showed me profiles. Couples who wanted children and couldn't have them. Pages and pages of smiling faces and letters about how much love they had to give. I picked a couple from Minnesota. Sarah and David. She was a teacher, he was an engineer. They'd been married 12 years and had tried everything. The letter Sarah wrote was 6 pages long, and I read it maybe 100 times. She talked about the nursery they'd already decorated, yellow because they didn't care if it was a boy or a girl. She talked about the books they'd bought, the pediatrician they'd chosen, the family vacations they'd already planned. She talked about how much she wanted to be a mother, and how much she'd love any child who came into their life. I was 18 when I had him. Just barely. My birthday was 2 weeks before the delivery. Labor took 14 hours, and I remember being so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open, couldn't process what was happening. When they put him on my chest, I looked at his face for maybe 30 seconds before the nurse took him away. I signed the papers the next morning. My hand was shaking so bad that my signature looked like someone else's. Patricia was there, And so were Sarah and David, and I remember Sarah was crying and saying thank you over and over, and I just kept nodding because I couldn't speak. They let me hold him one more time before they left. He was wrapped in a blue blanket with little elephants on it, and his eyes were closed, and he smelled like baby powder and something else I couldn't name. Something that was just him. I looked at his face and I said, "I'm sorry," and then I handed him to Sarah, and they walked out of the hospital, and that was it. I went home. I finished high school. I got a job at a coffee shop, then a better job at a bank. I saved money, went to community college at night, transferred to a state school, graduated with a degree in accounting. Got an entry-level position at a firm downtown. Worked my way up. Made manager by 28, senior manager by 32, partner track by 35. I built a life. A real one. I bought a condo, then a house. I dated carefully, men who were nothing like Kyle, men with steady jobs and adult vocabularies and the ability to take responsibility for their own choices. I married one of them when I was 31, a software developer named Marcus who made me laugh and never once made me feel like a problem to be solved. We had 2 kids together. Emma, then Jack. A house in the suburbs, a dog, a vegetable garden that we ignored every summer until everything died. I didn't forget about the baby I gave up. I couldn't. But I learned to carry it differently. It became something I lived with, not something I lived under. A closed door in a house I'd built with my own hands. I never told Marcus the full story. Not at first. I'd mentioned an ex-boyfriend who treated me badly, a difficult time in high school, a situation I'd had to handle. He didn't push. That was one of the things I loved about him, he trusted me to share things when I was ready. The first time I tried to find him, I was 38. Marcus knew by then. I told him the whole story one night after Emma was born, when I was holding her in the hospital and suddenly couldn't stop crying. He'd held my hand and listened and said he was proud of me, and then he'd never brought it up again unless I did. The agency Patricia worked for had closed years earlier, bought out by a larger organization with offices in 3 states. I called them, explained my situation, and they sent me a form. 10 pages of questions about my medical history, my reasons for searching, my expectations for contact. I filled it out carefully, honestly, and mailed it back with a check for the processing fee. 6 weeks later, I got a letter. My son's adoptive parents had also registered with a reunion database. They were open to contact. A packet was being sent to their last known address with my information. I waited. A week, then 2, then 4. Nothing. I called the agency again. They told me the packet had been delivered, that these things sometimes took time, that I should be patient. I was patient. Another month passed. Then another. On a Thursday in March, I got an email. The subject line said, "From your son." I read it 17 times before I could respond. His name was Lucas. He was 20 years old, a sophomore at the University of Michigan, studying pre-med. He said he'd always known he was adopted, that Sarah and David had told him the story when he was old enough to understand, that he'd spent years wondering about me. He said he wasn't angry. He said he wanted to meet me. We started emailing, then texting, then phone calls, awkward at first, full of long silences and small talk that felt enormous. He told me about his life, his friends, his classes, the girl he'd been dating for 6 months. He told me Sarah and David had been wonderful parents, that he'd had a good childhood, that he was grateful. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I thought about him all the time. I told him that giving him up was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but that I'd done it because I wanted him to have a better life than I could give him at 17. We planned a meeting. He'd fly to Chicago, where I lived, over spring break. I'd pick him up at the airport. We'd have lunch, get to know each other, see where things went. 3 days before he was supposed to arrive, I got a text from him. Different than usual, shorter. "Can I ask you something about my biological father?" My stomach dropped. Lucas had asked about Kyle exactly once, in our second phone call, and I'd given him the basic facts. We'd dated in high school, he hadn't wanted to be involved, we'd had no contact since. Lucas had said okay and changed the subject, and I'd been relieved. Now I typed back, "Of course. What do you want to know?" I found him. On social media. I wasn't going to reach out, but then I saw something and I wanted to ask you about it first. I stared at my phone. I hadn't looked Kyle up in years. After high school, I'd made a conscious decision to stop checking, to stop torturing myself with whatever version of his life he was performing online. I didn't want to know if he was successful or miserable or anything in between. "What did you see?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then a link. I clicked it. A Facebook profile. Kyle's profile. Older now, obviously, we all were, but still recognizable. The same jaw, the same confidence. He'd put on weight, lost some hair. His profile picture showed him in a suit, shaking hands with someone at what looked like a ribbon-cutting ceremony. I scrolled down, confused about what Lucas wanted me to see. Kyle was married. Had 3 kids. Lived in the same town where we'd grown up. Worked in real estate, apparently. His wall was full of posts about listings and open houses and market trends. Then I saw it. A post from 2 weeks ago. Kyle standing in front of a church, wearing a ribbon that said volunteer in big letters. The caption read, "Honored to chair this year's Youth Mentorship Gala. These kids deserve adults who show up for them, especially the ones from difficult situations. Every child deserves a chance. Hashtag second chances, hashtag community first, hashtag paying it forward." I read it 3 times. Then I read the comments. Dozens of people praising him for his generosity, his dedication, his heart for underprivileged youth. His wife had written, "So proud of this man and his commitment to these kids," red heart emoji. My phone buzzed. Lucas again. "Is this the guy who told you he wouldn't give you a cent?" I couldn't answer. Not right away. I sat on my couch and stared at that photo of Kyle in his volunteer ribbon, grinning at the camera, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Not sadness. Not regret. Something harder. Something with edges. "Yes," I finally typed back. "That's him. Does he know about me?" He knew. He didn't want to know. A long pause. Then, "Can I show you something else?" Another link. This one to a local news article. Local Realtor Champions Adoption Awareness Month. A photo of Kyle speaking at a podium, a banner behind him that read, "Every child deserves a family." I read the article. Kyle had given a speech about the importance of adoption, about his personal connection to the cause, about how giving children a loving home is the greatest gift we can offer. He'd urged attendees to support local adoption agencies and foster care programs. He'd received a standing ovation. There was no mention of me. No mention of a teenage girlfriend. No mention of a pregnancy or a choice or a boy he'd walked away from. Just this polished version of himself, this community leader with a heart of gold, collecting applause for caring about children he'd never had to actually raise. "He's using it," Lucas texted. "He's using adoption to make himself look good. While you actually went through it." I didn't know what to say. I still don't know if there are words for what I felt in that moment. It wasn't anger, exactly, although anger was part of it. It was more like watching someone steal something you'd paid for with years of your life and parade it around like they'd earned it. My phone rang. "Lucas. I want to do something," he said when I answered. "I want to tell people the truth." "Lucas. I'm not asking your permission. I'm asking if you'd want to be part of it." I should have said no. I should have been the adult, the one who talked about moving on and letting go and not stirring up drama from 2 decades ago. That's what a reasonable person would do. A mature person. A person who'd built a good life and had nothing to gain from revenge. But I wasn't feeling reasonable. I wasn't feeling mature. I was feeling 20 years of silence pressing against my chest, 20 years of carrying this alone while the person who'd abandoned me got to pretend it never happened. "What did you have in mind?" Lucas had done his research. Not just the Facebook snooping, but real research, the kind of digging that only someone with too much time and an internet connection can do. He'd found Kyle's real estate company website, his speaking schedule, his professional bio. He'd found the charity gala where Kyle was about to give another speech about youth empowerment in 3 weeks. He'd also found something else. "He has a podcast," Lucas said. We were on FaceTime now, my laptop propped up on the kitchen counter while Marcus watched TV in the other room. "Called Real Talk Real Estate. It's not big, maybe a few thousand listeners, but he posts clips on LinkedIn all the time. Business advice, that kind of thing. But he also does these personal growth episodes where he talks about his values and his community work." "Okay." The most recent one is about adoption. Lucas's face on the screen was calm, but his eyes had something in them I recognized. Something I'd seen in the mirror for years. He talks about how close to his heart the cause is. How he's seen firsthand the impact of giving children a second chance. He doesn't say your name. He doesn't say anything specific. But if you listen to it, you'd think he was some kind of hero. I listened to it. Lucas sent me the link, and I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store and listened to Kyle's voice, older now, deeper, more polished, talk for 40 minutes about the importance of supporting children in need. At one point, he said, "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. We all have. But I believe in redemption. I believe that we can become better people, and that our past doesn't have to define us. That's why I'm so passionate about this work, because I know what it's like to have a second chance." I had to turn it off after that. The gala was scheduled for a Saturday night at a country club in the town where Kyle and I had grown up. I still had family there. My mom had passed a few years back, but my dad was in an assisted living facility nearby, and I visited him every month or so. It wouldn't be unusual for me to be in town that weekend. It wouldn't raise any flags. Lucas flew in on Thursday. I picked him up at the airport, just like we'd originally planned, and when he came through the arrivals gate, I saw him for the first time in person. 20 years old. Taller than I expected, with dark hair like mine and a way of standing that reminded me of my father. He looked nothing like Kyle. I was grateful for that. We hugged. It was awkward and wonderful, and I cried, which I hadn't planned to do. He cried too, a little, though he tried to hide it. We stood there in the middle of O'Hare while people streamed around us, and I held my son for the first time since he was 2 days old. The plan was simple. Lucas would attend the gala. He'd already registered as a guest, it was open to the public, tickets were $50, and the confirmation email had arrived 3 days ago. He'd wait until Kyle finished his speech, until the applause died down, until people started milling around with their drinks and their small talk. Then he'd introduce himself. "I'm not going to make a scene," Lucas said. "We were sitting in my dad's kitchen the night before, going over the details. Marcus had stayed home with Emma and Jack, he knew what we were doing, he supported it, but he didn't want to be there when it happened. I'm just going to talk to him. Tell him who I am. See what he does. And if he denies it? Then I have a DNA test." I stared at him. "You got a DNA test?" "He's my biological father. I'm allowed to know that." Lucas shrugged, like this was obvious. "I ordered one of those ancestry kits a year ago. My results are in the system. If he ever tests, or if any of his family ever tests, it'll show up. But I also have my birth certificate from the agency, with your name on it. And I have every email you've ever sent me, where you talk about him." "I never said his full name in those emails." "No. But you said enough." Lucas pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. "You said he was on the baseball team. That his family had money. That his dad worked in construction. That his mom called your mom about harassment." He looked up. "There's only one family in this town that fits all of that." I checked. I didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Maybe both. What if he gets aggressive? It's a public event. There'll be 100 people there. He's not going to do anything that makes him look bad in front of his donors. "And what do you want out of this? What's the goal?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want him to know that I know. I want him to look me in the face and see the kid he threw away. That's it. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a relationship. I just want him to understand that I exist, and that I know exactly who he is." The gala was at a venue I remembered from high school. The country club where the popular kids had their proms, their birthday parties, their graduation celebrations. I'd never been inside. My family wasn't the country club type. I didn't attend. We'd decided that together, if I was there, it would be too easy for Kyle to paint me as bitter, vengeful, obsessed. This was Lucas's moment. His choice. I waited in the parking lot, in my rental car, watching people stream in through the front doors. Lucas texted me when he arrived. Inside. Lots of flowers. Open bar. Will update. Then, 40 minutes later, he's speaking now. Then nothing for almost an hour. I sat in that car and I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The basement bedroom, the pregnancy test, the hospital room. The years of silence, the building of a new life, the email that had changed everything. I thought about Sarah and David, who I'd never met but who I owed more than I could ever repay. I thought about Marcus and Emma and Jack, who were my family now, the family I'd made on purpose. And I thought about Kyle, standing at a podium in there, telling a room full of people how much he cared about children in need. At 9:47 p.m., my phone rang. "Lucas. It's done." "What happened?" He didn't recognize me at first. I walked up to him after his speech, when people were talking to him, shaking his hand. I waited my turn. When I got to him, I said, "Great speech, Mr. Thorne. I'm Lucas. My birth mother's name is Amanda Mitchell. I think you might remember her." I held my breath. He went white. Like, completely white. Just stared at me for maybe 10 seconds without saying anything. Then he looked around, I think to see if anyone was listening, and he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Of course he did. So I said, "That's fine. But I have a DNA test that says otherwise. And I have records from the adoption agency with her name on them. And I know exactly what you told her when she was 17 and pregnant and scared." I kept my voice low, calm. I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I just wanted him to hear it. And he grabbed my arm, hard. Tried to pull me away from the crowd. Said something like, "This isn't the place for this." I told him to take his hand off me. He did. Then he said, "Look, whatever she told you." "Whatever I told you," I repeated. "Right." So I said, "She told me you called her a mistake. She told me you said not to expect a cent. She told me you walked away and never looked back. And now you're up there talking about second chances and how much you care about kids?" I just let that sit for a second. Then I said, "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I'm not going to make a scene or go to the press or whatever you're afraid of. I just wanted you to know that I exist. That I turned out fine. That my mother, my real mother, Amanda, is an incredible person who built an amazing life without you. And that Sarah and David, the parents who actually raised me, did a better job than you ever could have. I was crying now. Silently, in the dark of the parking lot. What did he say? Nothing. He just stood there. I think someone was walking over to us, maybe his wife, I don't know, so I said, "Enjoy your gala," and I walked out. I saw him coming across the parking lot a few minutes later. Hands in his pockets, shoulders squared. He didn't look upset. He looked settled. Like something that had been off balance had finally clicked into place. He got in the car and we sat there for a minute without talking. "Thank you," I finally said. "For what?" "For being brave enough to do that. For being brave enough to exist." He laughed, a short, surprise sound. I didn't really do anything. I just told him the truth. That's everything. We drove back to my dad's house. Lucas was staying through the weekend, and we'd made plans: breakfast the next morning, a visit to my dad, a trip to the city to show him where I worked. Normal things. Family things. But there was one more moment that night that I'll never forget. We were sitting on the porch, drinking tea because neither of us wanted to sleep yet, when Lucas said, I looked him up pretty thoroughly. Before all this. I know. Not just the charity stuff, everything. His business, his family, his finances. He paused. He's in trouble, actually. His real estate company took out some loans a few years ago that they can't repay. There are lawsuits pending, former clients claiming he misrepresented properties. His wife's family has been propping them up, but there's a limit to how long that can last. I didn't know what to say. I'm not going to do anything with that information, Lucas said quickly. That's not why I'm telling you. I just wanted you to know that the guy who told you not to expect a cent? He's barely got 2 cents himself. The house, the cars, the community leader act, it's all held together with string and prayer. How did you find all that? Court records are public. So are property liens. He's got 3 on his house alone. Lucas shook his head. I'm not saying karma is real. I'm not saying this is some kind of cosmic justice. I'm just saying that when he told you he wasn't going to ruin his life over a baby, he was making a promise he couldn't keep. He ruined it fine on his own. I thought about that for a long time after Lucas went to bed. About Kyle in that country club, with his volunteer ribbon and his speech about second chances, and the debt collectors probably already circling. About the life he'd built on the same foundation of avoidance and denial that had made him tell me I was a mistake in his basement bedroom all those years ago. And I thought about my life. My house, paid off. My career, built brick by brick. My children, all 3 of them now, who knew they were loved and wanted and valued. My husband, asleep in our bed back in Chicago, who'd never once made me feel like a problem to be solved. Kyle had spent 20 years pretending I didn't exist. Pretending Lucas didn't exist. Building a life on the lie that he could walk away from consequences. I'd spent 20 years building something real. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. It was something my mom used to do when I was little. Saturday morning pancakes with blueberries, stacked high, syrup on the side. I hadn't made them in years, but it felt right. Lucas came downstairs around 8, still sleepy, and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Smells good. Sit down. I'll bring you a plate. We ate together in comfortable silence. The morning sun came through the windows, lighting up the dust motes in the air, making everything look soft and golden. I watched my son, pour more syrup on his pancakes and complain about the coffee being too strong, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not closure, exactly. The books and movies always talk about closure, like it's a door you can shut and lock and walk away from. But this was more like arriving somewhere. Like finally getting to a place I'd been traveling toward for 20 years without knowing it. I want to meet Emma and Jack, Lucas said, between bites. I mean, if that's okay. If it wouldn't be weird for them. It won't be weird. They know about you. They've known for a couple years now. You told them? I told them there was a baby I had when I was very young, who I loved very much but couldn't take care of, who went to live with another family. I told them that someday, when they were older, they might get to meet him. I smiled. They've been asking about you ever since. Lucas set down his fork. His eyes were bright. Okay, he said. Good. 3 weeks later, Lucas flew out to Chicago again. Marcus picked him up from the airport this time. They talked on the phone a few times by then, mostly about computers and video games, bonding over their shared inability to understand why I liked true crime podcasts. Emma was nervous. She'd spent all morning cleaning her room, even though Lucas wasn't going to see it. Jack was the opposite, bouncing off the walls, full of questions about Michigan and college and whether Lucas had ever met any famous football players. When Lucas walked through the front door, there was a moment of absolute stillness. All of us standing in the entryway, looking at each other. Then Emma stepped forward and hugged him, and Jack started talking a mile a minute about his school science project, and Marcus clapped Lucas on the shoulder and said, "Welcome to the chaos." We had dinner that night. Homemade lasagna, garlic bread, a salad that nobody touched. Lucas told stories about his roommate and his professors and the terrible dining hall food. Emma asked if he had a girlfriend. He did. Her name was Priya, she was pre-law, they'd met in a chemistry class neither of them should have been taking. Jack asked if he could come visit Ann Arbor. Lucas said yes, anytime. After dinner, while Marcus and the kids were watching a movie, Lucas and I stepped out onto the back porch. The night was cool but not cold, and you could see a few stars through the light pollution. "I want to say something," Lucas said, "and I don't want you to cry. I make no promises." He smiled. "When I was growing up, I always wondered about you. Not all the time, but sometimes. Especially when I was a kid, before I really understood everything. I'd wonder what you looked like, and what your voice sounded like, and whether you ever thought about me. I thought about you every day. I know that now." He looked out at the backyard, the swing set we'd put up when Emma was 3, the vegetable garden that was mostly weeds at this point. "But when I was a kid, I couldn't know that. All I had was the story Sarah and David told me, that you were very young, and you loved me, and you wanted me to have a good life. And I believed them, because they never gave me any reason not to. But believing something and knowing it are different things. I waited. When I started searching for you, I didn't know what I'd find. I thought maybe you'd moved on completely. Forgotten about me. Built a life where I didn't exist. And I told myself that would be okay, that you'd made a hard choice and you deserved to live with however you'd processed it. But you hadn't forgotten. You registered with the reunion database. You wrote me emails that I've read probably 100 times. You cried at the airport when you saw me." He turned to face me. "You did the hardest thing a person can do, and you did it because you loved me. And then you spent 20 years becoming the kind of person who could look me in the face and tell me the truth, all of it, without flinching." I was crying now. I couldn't help it. "I'm proud of you," Lucas said. "I know that sounds weird, a kid being proud of his mom. But I am. I'm proud of who you became. You should be proud of yourself." "I am." He grinned. "But I had Sarah and David. I had it easy." He paused. "You built all this from nothing. After someone told you that you were a mistake, that you weren't worth a cent, you went out and proved him wrong in every way that mattered. That's not easy. That's incredible." I wiped my eyes. "When did you get so smart?" "Genetics, probably." We laughed. It was the first time we'd laughed together like that, easy, comfortable, like we'd been doing it for years. "I should let you know," Lucas said, his tone shifting slightly. "I did something without asking you first." "What?" "That podcast Kyle has. Real Talk Real Estate. He posted a new episode last week. Another personal growth one, about facing adversity and staying focused on your goals." Lucas pulled out his phone, scrolled to something. He didn't mention the gala. Didn't mention me. It was like our conversation never happened. Classic denial. That sounds like him. So I left a review. I stared at him. A review. On the podcast platform. 5 stars, actually, I figured that would make it more visible. He handed me his phone. The review was short. Just a few sentences. "Great podcast. Really enjoyed the episode about second chances. I'm actually the son Kyle's high school girlfriend gave up for adoption 20 years ago after he told her he wouldn't give her a cent of support. Funny how things work out. He seems like a totally different person now. Growth is beautiful." I read it twice. "It's been up for 5 days, Lucas said. He hasn't responded. But the episode comments have some interesting new additions. People asking questions. People wanting to know more about the story." "Lucas. I didn't name you. I didn't give any identifying details except what I said. It's not defamation because it's true. And it's not harassment because I only said it once." He shrugged. "I just thought the people listening to his personal growth content might want some additional context." I should have been upset. I should have lectured him about taking the high road and moving on and not poking the bear. But sitting on that porch, looking at my son's face, all I felt was a kind of satisfaction. "Your father would be furious if he saw this." "Which one?" I laughed out loud. "David, Marcus. Both of them. They'd tell you to delete it." "Probably. Are you going to tell me to delete it?" I handed him back his phone. "I'm going to tell you to come inside and have some dessert. Marcus made brownies." Lucas grinned and stood up. "I like these family dinners. Get used to them." We went back inside. The movie was ending, Emma was half asleep on the couch, and Jack was already eyeing the brownie pan on the counter. Lucas sat down next to Marcus and said something that made him laugh. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them. My family. Not the one I'd expected at 17. Not the one anyone would have predicted. But mine, built with my own hands, piece by piece, over decades. I never heard from Kyle directly. Not after the gala, not after Lucas's review, not after anything. His podcast quietly stopped posting about a month later. The last episode was about knowing when to pivot. I didn't listen to it. Lucas graduated from Michigan the following spring. Sarah and David flew in for the ceremony, and I met them for the first time at a breakfast the morning before. Sarah was smaller than I'd pictured, with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair. David shook my hand firmly and thanked me for everything, which seemed backwards, but I understood what he meant. We sat together at the graduation. All of us, Sarah and David, Marcus and me, Emma and Jack. When Lucas walked across the stage, we all cheered. We took photos afterward, different combinations, Lucas with his parents, Lucas with me, Lucas with everyone. One of the photos made it onto Sarah's Facebook page. The caption said, "Our son, surrounded by everyone who loves him." I printed a copy and hung it in my office. Last month, I was cleaning out some boxes in the basement, old files, tax returns from years ago, things I should have thrown out long before, and I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed and creased. It was the letter Sarah had written me 22 years ago, when I was choosing an adoptive family. The 6-page letter about the nursery and the books and the family vacations. I'd made a copy before I signed everything. I'd forgotten I had it. I read it again, sitting on the basement floor with dust on my hands. We promised to love this child with everything we have. We promised to tell them, when they're ready, about the incredible courage it took for you to make this choice. We promised to raise them to be kind, and curious, and brave. And we promised that someday, if it's meant to be, you'll see for yourself the person they've become. I folded the letter back up and put it in my desk drawer, where I keep the things that matter. They'd kept every promise. And so had I.